My incident took place in August of 1955. I'd been taken to Middlesex Hospital in New Brunswick, New Jersey, due to a miscarriage. Placed in a ward because I was a military dependent, the doctor who was to care for me never came. I was placed at a 45-degree angle due to bleeding and was left that way for almost 8 days. No one heard my pleas.
Hello?
By the 8th day, I could not hear anyone. My eyes could not see. I should have been dead. I recall being pulled down into a spinning vortex. I realized my body was being drawn downward. I panicked and I fought, trying to grab at the sides of the vortex, and all I could think of was my 2 children. Please, not now. But I kept moving downward. I tried to see something, but all there was to see was this cyclonic void that tapered into a funnel. I kept grabbing at the sides, but my fingers had nothing to grasp. Terror set in. True terror. I saw a black spot, darker than the funnel and like a black curtain. And then there was a white dot, like a bright light at the end of the funnel. But as I grew closer, it was a small, white skull. It became larger, grinning at me with bare sockets, traveling straight toward me. My kids! My kids! Let me go! My babies need me! No! 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 Light, the brightest light I have ever known or will ever see again, was in the place of that skull. It was so bright, yet it did not blind me. It was a welcome, calming light. The black spot or curtain was gone. I felt absolute peace of mind and sensed myself floating upward. And I was back. I was taken to the operating room, given several pints of blood, and was released a week later. My near-death experience has made me quite sensitive to many more things than my mind understands. It was the most horrendous, yet the most gratifying experience I've ever had in my life. I'm dispensable. I do not value things as I once did. As for the light, it was then and remains so my encounter with the most powerful of all entities, the giver of life on both sides of the curtain. After all, I was given a second chance. I am blessed, and I cannot ask for more.
I'm Sue Blackmore. I'm a visiting professor in psychology at the University of Plymouth, UK. And I've been studying out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences for nearly 40 years. I had what really amounts to a near-death experience back in 1970 when I was a student, and I was completely convinced that I'd been to other worlds, that my spirit had left my body, that I'd gone into the light, and that, I was going to prove to closed-minded scientists that there's more in this world than we knew about. That all changed when I started to do the research. I've listened to and read so many out-of-body and near-death experiences in all these years. And my rule really has become, listen hard to what people say. Believe what they describe in terms of their feelings and their visions and what they saw and how they felt. But take with a big pinch of salt their interpretations. I set those all aside. But the only way we're going to understand what's really going on is to take seriously people's experiences and then learn how the brain is doing it. And that's the wonders of our neuroscience now. We're really beginning to find out. People see and feel the most extraordinary things in near-death experiences, and what we're beginning to learn now from all the neuroscience is how different realities can be made by the brain. So when the random activity spreads through different areas of the brain, it's producing all these realistic experiences. In the visual cortex, when the random firing passes waves across the cortex, it produces the visions of tunnels and lights and being sucked into the light, and that seems absolutely real. Or when the temporoparietal junction is upset, that's where our bodily sense is constructed, and we start to feel that we're floating and drifting or leaving our body completely. And when the temporal lobe starts to go random and chaotic, then memories start flooding up and strange visions, and they seem real because that's the only thing the brain has got going at the time. The tunnels and with the lights at the end and the spirals and being sucked into the vortex is very common in near-death experiences. They're found also with drugs like the major hallucinogens, mescaline, psilocybin, LSD. They all produce these things because they're all created by random firing, waves of firing passing across the cortex. People see the most extraordinary range of different things in the later stages of the near-death experience. I mean, this skull is a particularly strange and interesting example. I would guess that she didn't have a great flood of endorphins at the time, and she was utterly exhausted and been there an awfully long time, but it'll be something in her memory that's come up that's produced that particular image of death. Or occasionally people in medical crises are injected with naloxone, which suppresses the endorphins, and then they can have really awful experiences. Happily, these are rare. The vast majority of people, when they get beyond the tunnel and light and go into other worlds, see wonderful landscapes with green grass, as green as anything they've ever seen, and maybe loved ones coming towards them, angelic beings, and a sense of wonderful calm and peace, and it's just delightful. This is primarily because of the endorphins flooding the brain, and they produce a sense of equanimity and even joy of pleasure, and everything seems just as it should be, just perfect. Going down the tunnel into the light is one of the classic experiences. So what is this light, and why do you seem to be dragged towards it? The visual cortex is about a quarter of a human brain. It's massive because we're very visual animals. Now, when the brain is in real trouble and stress, perhaps not enough oxygen, perhaps damage to it, you get random activity flooding across the cortex. All the cells which should be suppressed by other cells should be organized by the input. None of that can work, and they're all just randomly firing. Now, when you realize that more of the cells, far more, are devoted to the center of the visual field than the periphery, then you can see why the bright light is just a little circle in the middle to begin with. But as the progression goes on, that light gets bigger and bigger. More and more cells are taken into this kind of chaos. The light gets bigger and bigger. You just feel whoomph, you're being dragged into that light. And that's all you've got. That's your reality for the moment. This wonderful, bright, white or golden light. Everything's fine. It's all okay. It's beautiful. It's how it must be. It's perfect. That is quite an amazing sense. When you get it like this, the sense is, now I've learned something profound. And then you come back to life in a very different way, as Gloria did. She describes how she didn't care so much about things anymore. And that's how it is when your whole sense of self has been disrupted. and put together again. You're never quite the same again.
I'm Dr. Diane Corcoran, the president of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I first was exposed to near-death experiences when I was a very young nurse in Vietnam and have been working with it over 40 years. So as I look at these experiences, I compare them with the many hundreds of experiences and thousands of experiences I've been told about. Usually people will talk about separating from their body and then going into what they describe as a tunnel or a circular place and kind of whizzing through that and seeing the bright light at the end. That's the most typical. She did not mention that she felt like her physical body was separating, or her spiritual body was separating from her physical body. And that is a very common aspect for the near-death experience. There are many other attributes to the near-death experience. Going to a place that they've not ever seen before. Being someplace where they have colors and flowers that are different colors than we have here. Hearing music that we don't have here. Seeing different kinds of things that are unusual, and some people call the city of lights. They have lots of bright lights. The sense of oneness they get with nature. The overall knowledge that people get and say, I knew everything all at once. A life review where people see aspects of their life that is like in a panoramic circle, and they see all the things that they did in their life, and there's a sense of self-judgment about different aspects of things that they've done in their life. The skull that she saw is very atypical. In my 40 years, I have never ever heard of another person talk about a skull and then having it all break up. I simply don't know what to think about the skull, and what that symbolizes for her would be something that I really would need to talk to her more about. There are people who have more frightening experiences, but they are experiences in which people reconcile the experience in the end to be something more positive. For those people who are new to the near-death experience, the characteristic of going through a white light or being drawn into the white light through a tunnel is fairly common, but not something that everybody sees. The sense of being in the white light is a sense of love and contentment and peace. As she said, never feeling more calm or at peace as she did in that moment. The light is about love. It's about unconditional love. It's about peace. It's calmness. And it is the most powerful thing that near-death experiencers will describe, is the love and contentment of being in this light. One of the most important ones that we hear very frequently is that they will see deceased loved ones, and those loved ones will communicate with them, in some cases tell them that they cannot stay there, and they will have a discussion with them. And many people will say they were so happy being in the light, in the love, that they just wanted to stay. She emphasized that she wanted to go back. She was worried about her kids, and so for her, that was the emphasis. When people have a near-death experience, they tend to have different after effects. And one of those after effects is that they get and understand a message about their purpose in life. And that becomes a laser beam for them to focus on. And many times it's very difficult for families and friends because the focus and purpose that they're supposed to live their life through is at the expense of their family and friends sometimes, because they are trying to fulfill something that they know is their destiny, and they are going to do whatever they have to make that happen.
I am Pim van Lommel, a cardiologist from the Netherlands, and I've been studying near-death experiences for the last 30 years, especially in survivors of cardiac arrest. Well, when a near-death experience starts, the first thing is they don't feel the body anymore. They don't feel the physical pain from a traffic accident or from the heart attack or whatever. And they have the idea, well, is this death? And then sometimes they can have the out-of-body experience, and then they go through the tunnel, mostly with a feeling of a high speed. And during this experience of going through a tunnel or a vortex, you're not in the physical world anymore. And about 15% of the patients who have a near-death experience have this frightening period in the start of this near-death experiences. Mostly later, the near-death experience become much more positive. She's becoming more and more frightened, and then she sees a skull, which is even more frightening for her as well. And this period in a near-death experience is usually very short. In her case, it takes a long time. And just as she crosses this skull, this frightening image, then only she becomes part of the light, which usually is called unconditional love, total acceptance, just compassion, empathy. Sometimes they see in this period of light, of this realm of light, a life review, how they lived, how they felt in the past. And this is a very intense and overwhelming experience. Sometimes they meet deceased relatives as well, which is not shown in this case of this patient. There's no time during the experience, because people can experience everything from the past and everything from the future. And then suddenly they are back in the body. In this case, you see two doctors, two physicians at her bed. She lost consciousness due to enormous loss of blood, and she was operated upon. The near-death experience is mostly a positive experience, but to accept the experience you need to share it with others. And the huge problem in the Western society is that people cannot listen without comment, without criticism. Doctors, nurses, family members and partners don't believe your story because they don't know anything about it. They think it's an hallucination, they think it's a side effect of drugs. And to accept your experience, this overwhelming experience, you need to share it with others. And it means that the first years after such an experience, which we can call a spiritual trauma, give rise to depression, loneliness, and homesickness. And as soon as you've been able to share it with others, you can start to integrate your experience into your daily life. But mostly people are silent for years because nobody will believe them. During cardiac arrest, there's no brain function at all. The brain stem and the cortex don't function anymore because there's no blood going to the brain. And you need a functioning brain to have hallucinations. And this kind of consciousness people experience during an NDE, also during cardiac arrest, is an enhanced consciousness, much more enhanced than a normal consciousness. You can hardly talk about your near-death experience because doctors, nurses, family members, partners don't believe your story. They think it's just an hallucination or side effects of drugs. So the period after can be a trauma as well. So one of the aspects people tell us after near-death experience is that they have a transformation, and especially they talk about enhanced intuitive sensitivity, which means that they are connected with other people as well as with nature, with the planet Earth, but they can know beyond their own will what other people feel, their emotions. I know my neighbor will die in 3 weeks, and he will die in 3 weeks, or they know you have cancer, and later it happens to be cancer. They know things they cannot know. So these three changes are just seen in patients who have a near-death experience and not seen in patients who have just a cardiac arrest without an NDE. It's not about the materialistic aspects of life. It's not about a huge car, a big house, a lot of money. It's about how you live your life and in unconditional love and compassion and empathy towards others and towards yourself.